Imagine a simple house in Bethlehem without luxury or signs of nobility, an ordinary family where the dust from the roads mixed with the smell of freshly baked bread. It was in this setting that Zeruiah was born, daughter of Jesse, the same lineage that would bring King David into the world. But before the spotlight fell on her younger brother and his great deeds, there was this little remembered figure, and yet indispensable. Zeruiah came into the world shrouded in a certain silence. The Bible does not say exactly when she was born, nor does it describe her appearance or her first steps, but the mere fact that she is mentioned as David's sister is enough for us to know that the blood running through her veins had something to say. Jesse's house, though ordinary in the eyes of the people, harbored seeds of royalty, and Zeruiah's story springs from there like a resilient bush among stones. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting Bible stories and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. If you like the content, feel free to support our work with a financial donation by clicking on the Thanks a Lot button. You can also become a member of the channel and enjoy exclusive benefits. She grew up watching her younger brother be anointed a prophet, then a warrior, and finally, a king. But don't be fooled into thinking she lived in his shadow. Zeruiah was much more than the sister of the famous shepherd who defeated a giant. She was a mother, and not just any children, but fierce warriors, men who shaped the course of the kingdom of Israel alongside, and sometimes against, David himself. Curious, isn't it? Whenever the Bible refers to her children, it does not call them by their fathers' names. They are the sons of Zeruiah. It's a detail that may go unnoticed, but it says a lot about who she was. A woman so strong, so remarkable, that even without a direct voice in the sacred texts, her name became synonymous with strength. And that's where things start to get interesting, because to understand who she really was, you have to look at those she raised. And what her sons became, oh, that's worth telling. But there's one thing about Zeruiah that still has many people scratching their heads today. It's not just what she did, nor what her children did. It's where she really came from. Everyone knows she was David's sister, but sister on her father's side, on her mother's side. The details are a bit unclear, and that's where the thread of the story begins to unravel. Some scholars believe that Zeruiah and her sister Abigail may not have been the daughters of Jesse, David's father, but of another man named Nahash, a name that appears almost whispered in the corners of Scripture. If true, this would make them David's half-sisters, linked by their mother. Curious, isn't it? It's as if the story is full of half-open doors, waiting for someone to push them open to see what's on the other side. This possibility changes everything, because it means that Zeruiah came from a mixture of Israelite blood with possibly Ammonite roots, in other words, foreign. And at that time, that was more than just a simple detail in a family record. It was a topic of conversation, judgment, even suspicion. But at the same time, it was as if history itself was saying that God chooses whom he wants, regardless of origin, and that even a woman of mixed blood could leave a legacy so strong that it would transcend generations. Now imagine growing up in that environment, surrounded by siblings and half-siblings with intertwined stories, suspicious glances, and perhaps a divided identity. This helps to understand why she carried so much weight in her name, and why, later on, her children were not known by their father, whoever he was, but by her. Zeruiah was not just another woman in a large family. She was the reference point, the foundation. And that's where the mystery gets even deeper. Because while everyone knows her children, no one knows who the man she married was, or if she ever actually got married. And the silence surrounding that forgotten name says a lot more than it seems. And then there's a detail that no one can quite explain. The father of Zeruiah's children simply disappears from the story. Literally. The Bible doesn't mention him. Not a single line, not a name, not a sigh, as if he had been deliberately erased or perhaps never mattered. Strange, isn't it? Especially in a culture where fathers' names were almost sacred, passed down from generation to generation like family crests. The absence of this name raises a lot of questions. Was Zeruiah a widow? Was her husband a foreigner, and that's why his name was omitted? Or maybe she raised her children alone, without a man by her side? Whatever the answer, the silence speaks volumes. And the most curious thing is that, even without a known father, her sons became great men, strong, daring, brave, names that echoed throughout the kingdom of Israel. That alone says a lot about who she was. Because, think about it, raising 3 warriors in times of war in a male-dominated society was no easy task. You don't learn that in school or from your neighbor's advice. It took strength, it took determination, it took soul. Zeruiah seems to have been exactly that, raw soul in the form of a mother. And then comes that chilling detail. Throughout the Bible, her 3 sons, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel, are always referred to as the sons of Zeruiah. Never the sons of so-and-so, as one would expect. This kind of thing didn't happen by accident. It was as if the sacred text itself was trying to tell us something. Something about this woman's authority, about the mark she left, about the silent strength she carried in her gaze. But to understand why this trio became known by their mother's name, you need to know these guys, because what they did and what they became was nothing short of impressive. And that's where the story really starts to pick up speed. Zeruiah had 3 sons, 3, and none of them went unnoticed by history: Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Those names alone carry a certain weight, don't they? They sound like names of thunder, arrows, and swords. And maybe that's what they were. Each of them became synonymous with strength on the battlefield, men who not only followed David, but were often the arms and fists of the king's will. The Bible doesn't waste words when it talks about them. Without exception, they are always referred to as the sons of Zeruiah. It's as if their mother were there, present in every action, every victory, every conflict. It was her in their names, her in their blood, her in their legacy. And we're not talking about sons who were on the sidelines of history. These 3 were central figures in the most tense moments of David's reign. Joab, the best known, was the general of the army, the commander, a man who knew when to attack, when to retreat, and when to act on his own, even if it angered David himself. Abishai was the type who would face 300 men with a single spear and come out standing. Asahel, the youngest, ran as if he had been born with the wind in his legs, light, fast, almost impossible to catch. 3 men forged in the fire of war, 3 men who carried their mother's courage in their eyes, and also perhaps the same stubbornness. They were not saints. They were intense, unpredictable, and when battle called, they responded with strength and without hesitation. But none of them came out of nowhere. None became warriors by chance. There was a moment long ago that changed everything. A chance, a test. And it was Joab who seized that opportunity as if he were seizing his own life. From then on, he would no longer be just the eldest son. He would be the leader, the first to climb the hill, and the first to leave his mark with blood, sword, and silence. David was already king. He had promise, anointing, and followers, but something was missing: conquering Jerusalem. The city was in the hands of the Jebusites, who mocked the Israelites. They said that even the blind and crippled could defend those walls. Pure arrogance. But that was when Joab, the firstborn of Zeruiah, made the impossible seem simple. David issued the challenge. Whoever climbed up the water channel first and took the fortress would become commander of the army. It was a suicide mission, a narrow, dark, slippery tunnel, a trap disguised as a passageway. But Joab didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for an explanation. He didn't think twice. He went in, and he climbed up. Think about it, a man, alone, sneaking through a secret passage, feeling the dampness on his feet, the smell of stone and silence, with the risk of a sword at every turn. Climbing up there was like entering a tomb and hoping to come out on the right side. But Joab came out, and he came out with victory in his hands. He was the one who opened the gates of Jerusalem to David. He was the one who changed the course of that war. After that, there was no question. Joab became the commander, not because of his title, but because of his courage. He didn't earn a position, he earned respect, and from then on, he became David's right-hand man, and sometimes his heavy arm, a cold warrior, a sure strategist, but also ruthless when he thought it was necessary. Joab was not diplomatic, he was direct. He was the kind of man who did what had to be done, even if no one else had the courage. But he wasn't alone, because at his side, in the bloodiest battles, there was always someone else. A brother, a shield, a warrior as brave as he was, Abishai, the second son of Zeruiah. And this guy, my friend, he faced hundreds with just a spear. If Joab was the cool head in battle, Abishai was the heart on fire. There was something about him that pulsed differently, as if his soul was already ready for combat. He didn't need much conversation, just a sign, a gesture, and there he was with his sword in his hand. Abishai was the kind of man who never backed down. Never. And there is a story that proves it with gusto. In the midst of a violent battle, David was surrounded. Enemies came from all sides, like waves crashing against a rock, and the king, for a moment, faltered. He was exhausted, almost falling. One more blow, and it would have been over right there. But it wasn't over, because Abishai saw it, and he didn't think. He advanced like lightning, as if he had been born for that exact moment. He defended David with fury, like a cornered lion protecting his territory. He killed 300 men with a single spear. 300. That number echoes to this day, not only because of the quantity, but because of the message it sent. No one would touch David while he was standing, and he stood for a long time, always alongside his brother Joab, always on the battlefield, always honoring his mother's name. It was almost as if the two were two ends of the same sword. One thought, the other acted. One retreated, the other attacked, but both always made it clear whose sons they were, and between them was a third, the youngest, Asahel. A name less remembered but impossible to forget once you know the story. Because Asahel wasn't just fast, he was swift as the wind, agile as a gazelle in the desert, and it was that same speed that ended up leading him straight to the hardest fate a warrior could face. Asahel was different from his brothers. While Joab thought like a general and Abishai fought like a hero, Asahel ran, but it wasn't just running, it was as if his feet didn't touch the ground. They said he was as fast as a wild gazelle, one of those that disappear on the horizon before the sound of their footsteps reaches the wind. That speed became his trademark. In every battle, Asahel was the first to reach the enemy and the last to be touched. A shadow, a living arrow, a warning that the sons of Zeruiah were always one step ahead. But one day, that haste met its fate face to face. It was during a civil war between David's soldiers and Saul's men. On one side, Joab led David's servants. On the other, Abner, an experienced warrior, commander of Saul's army. And in the midst of all this tension, Asahel spotted Abner on the field. He didn't hesitate, not even for a second. He set off after him with the same haste as always, as if victory were just there within reach. Abner ran, not out of fear, but because he knew what was about to happen. He shouted at Asahel to stop, to change his target, to retreat. He begged, warned, insisted, but Asahel didn't listen. Or rather, he heard, but he didn't stop. His courage was greater than his caution, and when he got too close, Abner used his spear from behind. With a single blow, he pierced Asahel from side to side. The sound of his fall brought the field to a standstill, and where he fell, no one dared to go forward. It was as if the ground had swallowed everyone's breath. Asahel, the swift, the tireless, became a symbol of bravery and tragedy. And the echo of that death did not fade. It remained etched in the memory of the brothers, especially in Joab and Abishai. because they would not let it go. No way. And that's when the desire for revenge came into play with all the fury that only the sons of Zeruiah could carry. Asahel's body had not even grown cold, and the silence in Joab's heart was already a storm. It was as if the sound of that spear piercing his brother had never stopped echoing. Joab and Abishai did not cry in public. They did not make speeches or promises, but their eyes said it all. There was a debt, and that debt had a name: Abner. Time passed, and with it came opportunity. Abner, once a rival, decided to make peace with David. He offered his loyalty and wanted to help unify the tribes. Everything was settled, at least that's what David thought. But Joab hadn't forgotten. He saw Abner as his brother's killer. And it didn't matter if it was self-defense or if there had been a warning. For Joab, there was no excuse. So he did what he knew best. He took action. He called Abner aside as if to talk peacefully. "Just a word in private," he said. Nothing more suspicious than a whisper in the midst of so much war. And there at the gate of Hebron, a place of refuge, Joab plunged his knife into Abner's belly. Cold, fast, surgical. An execution, not a battle. David was furious. He wept publicly, mourned Abner's death, and made it clear that this was not his order. But Joab held his head high. For him it was justice, it was honor, it was blood for blood. Abishai, as always, was by his side, silent, steadfast, loyal, and the people began to realize that the children of Zeruiah had their own code. They acted in their own way. Even David, in moments of frustration, would vent, "These sons of Zeruiah are too strong for me." It was a bitter way of saying that even the king had difficulty controlling that deep-rooted fury. But that was only the beginning. Because Joab, with all his loyalty and violence, would still cross the line between serving the king and challenging the throne. Joab wasn't just a general, he was a force of nature. David knew it, the people knew it. And maybe, deep down, even Joab knew he had too much power in his hands. He didn't just obey, he made decisions. Sometimes decisions that even the king himself didn't dare to make. And that's when the line between loyalty and control began to blur. There was a time when David wanted to forgive Absalom, his rebellious son. The boy had risen up against his father and started a war, but David still loved him. He wanted to give him another chance. Joab heard this and couldn't accept it. For him, betrayal had a price, and that price was death. During a battle in the forest of Ephraim, Absalom got caught by his hair in a tree. He was defenseless, hanging between heaven and earth, literally. And while the soldiers hesitated, remembering the king's order to spare the young man, Joab arrived, looked at the scene and didn't think twice. He took 3 spears and stabbed the boy in the heart. No ceremony, no remorse. It was more than a blow, it was a message. Joab did not follow orders when he thought they went against reason, or against what he thought was right, and as much as it hurt David, he did not order punishment. Perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of exhaustion, perhaps because he knew that deep down, Joab was necessary. But that kind of freedom comes at a price, and Joab began to get used to the idea that he could do anything. He was like a war dog set loose, too wild to be tamed. And that only grew when David, now old, decided to name Solomon king. Joab did not accept it. He had other plans, other allies, and there, for the first time, he did not place himself at the side of the throne. He chose to support Adonijah, another son of David. A move that changed the game, because now Joab was no longer the protector of the kingdom. He was the traitor, and Solomon, still young, would have to deal with the long shadow cast by this man. Time forgives no one, not even the strongest or most feared men. Joab, who for years commanded armies and imposed his will, came to the end of his journey in the most bitter way possible. After Solomon ascended the throne, he knew he had to eliminate any threat, especially those who, like Joab, challenged his authority. And so, without hesitation, the king ordered the general's execution. Joab, who had so often held the lives of others in his hands, saw his own life taken away. Abishai, who had been a loyal ally over the years, disappeared from the stories without much detail. There are no clear records of what happened to him after the conflicts that marked the end of David's reign. Asahel, for his part, had his fate sealed early on, falling in battle, leaving behind a trail of speed that even death could not avoid. And Zeruiah, the woman behind these fierce men? The Bible is silent about her end. It does not say when she died, where, or how. We only know that her name lives on in the pages that tell of the exploits of her sons, who carried on her strength, her courage, and her indomitable spirit. It is as if Zeruiah were a shadow that follows the sun, always present, even when unseen. Her legacy is invisible but powerful. It is not in her own great deeds, but in what she created, in the blood, sweat, and battles of her children. And this final silence, this absence of details, leaves a door open. A door to think about what really matters. The stories that appear on the main stage are not always the only ones worth telling. Sometimes it's the voices behind the curtains, the roots hidden in the ground, that hold everything together. If Zeruiah were just a forgotten figure, the Bible would not have named her children after her. This simple detail teaches us something powerful. The real impact is not always in the spotlight, but in the silent force that shapes everything around us. Zeruiah was not a queen, she did not wield a sword, she did not ascend to a throne, but she was a mother, a foundation, a root, the voice that, even when silent, made her presence felt in every battle, every decision, every decisive moment in the history of Israel. Her life reminds us that sometimes the greatest power lies in the invisible, in what we hold on to so that others can shine, in the courage to persist even without recognition. Zeruiah faced the silence of stories, the absence of details, but her children carried her mark, a mark made of courage, loyalty, passion, and even stubbornness. They were not perfect, far from it, but they were strong because they had a firm foundation. We can also learn that legacy is not only what we leave behind in words, but in the actions we inspire. Zeruiah, with her quiet strength, raised men who changed the destiny of a nation. And even with flaws and conflicts, they were the continuation of her strength, a strength that never fell silent, even when the world seemed to ignore it. Deep down, Zeruiah invites us to look at our own lives. What invisible strengths do we carry? What roots are we cultivating? Sometimes what seems small or unimportant can be what keeps everything standing. And this truth is universal, no matter who you are or where you are. Her story, full of silences and echoes, shows that in the end, true courage does not need applause. It is enough to exist and make a difference, even if no one sees it. And while this truth echoes, other stories wait to be told. If you enjoyed Zeruiah's story and want to continue following other stories of faith and overcoming adversity, be sure to like this video and share it with your loved ones. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content. Together, we will explore more powerful lessons from the Bible.